Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Texas Podcast. I am your host, Gabe, and today we will be talking about the Battle of Medina. The Battle of Medina was fought approximately 20 miles south of San Antonio de Bejar on August 18, 1813, as part of the Mexican War of Independence against Spanish authority in Mexico. Bernardo Gutierrez de Lara took up the effort to free Texas from Spain. Colonel Gutierrez visited Washington, D.C., gaining some support for his plans. In 1812, Colonel Augustus McGee, who was a lieutenant who had commanded the U.S. Army troops guarding the border of the neutral ground in Spanish Texas, resigned his commission and formed the Republican Army of the North to aid the Gutierrez-McGee expedition. The Army flew a solid emerald green flag, thought to have been introduced by Colonel McGee, who was of Scot-Irish descent. Nacogdoches was taken on April 12, 1812. With little opposition, and on November 7, 1812, the Republican Army of the North marched into what is present-day Goliad, where they took Presidio La Bahia. The Spanish army soon confronted them, beginning a 4-month siege. While at Bahia, however, Colonel McGee died on February 6, 1813. After numerous battles and heavy losses, the Spanish lifted the siege and returned to San Antonio. On March 25, 1813, the Republican Army of the North left La Bahia for Bejar after receiving reinforcements. Colonel Samuel Kemper replaced McGee, and Lieutenant Colonel Reuben Ross was elected to second in command. There were approximately 1,400 Texans in Lara's Republican Army at the time, composed of Tejanos, Americans, Euro-Mexicans, former Spanish Royalist soldiers aided by an auxiliary force of Indians, and at least one black slave. The army, being led by General Toledo, had camped on the north bank of the Medina River, about 6 miles north of Arredondo's 1,800 Royalist troops, which were encamped near present-day Lemming, Texas. The battle lasted for 4 hours. Toledo's plan called for an ambush on the Royalist troops as they marched through a defile on the Bejar-Laredo Road. Similarly, Arredondo had sent out a scouting party with some cavalry in the morning to try to determine the location of Toledo's troops. Quite accidentally, they happened upon the Republican ambush and retreated after a brief exchange of fire. The Republican soldiers gave chase and apparently mistook the cavalry, which kicked up large clouds of dust, for the main army. It is believed that Toledo tried in vain to stop his troops from advancing. In their pursuit, they were slowed down by the sandy terrain. The guns that dragged with them became deeply mired. When they had reached the Spanish lines, they were tired and thirsty. However, they managed to rout some Spanish artillery units and were attempting a flanking maneuver when they were repulsed by Spanish cavalry units. The situation had been less than clear for Arredondo, who was prepared to order his troops to fall back when he seems to have been informed by a defector that the Republican troops were also attempting to disengage because of exhaustion. He then ordered an advance instead. The Republican army fled in disorder. Toledo and a few of his associates headed straight for Louisiana. Some of the combatants stopped in San Antonio just long enough to gather their families. The Spanish army continued to press, killing many of the fleeing soldiers. Many of the remainder were captured, and in a portent of the future Texas War of Independence were summarily executed. Fewer than 100 out of 1,400 soldiers of the Republican side survived, and the Royalist men only lost 55 men. The remains of the Republican troops were left to rot and were not buried until 1822, when Jose Felix Dos Palacios, the first governor of Coahuila, Texas, under the newly established United Mexican States, ordered a detachment of soldiers to gather their bones and bury them honorably under an oak tree that grew on the battlefield. Some of Gutierrez-McGee participants either were sons of the American Revolutionaries or had fought with Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812, and of the few who survived, some fought again during the Second Texas Revolution, which was from 1835 to 1836. Jose Antonio Navarro, a founding father of Texas, and Jose Francisco Ruiz, both future signers of the 1836 Texas Declaration of Independence, took part in the 1812-13 McGee, Gutierrez, and Toledo resistance movements, and later served as leaders in the Texas Revolution. One of the dead, Peter Sides, was an actual veteran of the American Revolution. Sides was about 62 when he marched off from his home in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with McGee and the other revolutionaries. a native of North Carolina of German ancestry, Seitz was a career soldier who fought in the 1st Militia at Nashboro and in Logan County, Kentucky, before he had his family relocated to Baton Rouge in 1799. Markers from the Daughters of the American Revolution and the Daughters of the Republic of Texas have been placed on the battle site in Side's honor. Nearly all the names of the other 1,300 or so dead from the Republican Army of the North have been lost to history. Of a very interesting note is a young lieutenant, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, fought in the bloody battle and followed his superior's orders by taking no prisoners. This heavily influenced how he would fight wars for the rest of his life, most famously during the Texas Revolution at the Battle of the Alamo and at the Goliad Massacre. The location of the Battle of Medina had not been archaeologically determined. There are 3 historical markers for the battle. The first marker was placed by the state of Texas for the 1936 Texas Centennial at the southeast corner of the U.S. Route 281 and Farm to Market Road 2537 in Behar County. The second marker was placed by the state of Texas in 2005 at the corner of Old Applewhite Road and Bruce Road in Atascosa County. The third marker was placed by Robert P. Marshall in 2013 on Old Pleasanton Road south of the intersection with Bruce Road. This marker is based on his own research and not recognized by the state. The Battle of Medina goes down in Texas history as one of the most bloodiest and the most brutal battle to take place in Texas history. I would like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you.